Hello and good morning, party people.
Hello.
Good morning.
Guys, I got to start off with something that I just think is so amazing about your podcast after the Uprising, and that is that everybody lives on a street where something has happened, and so many stories have gone untold, and I'm hoping and praying that your podcast inspires people to step out and share the real journey like you're doing here with Darren Seals.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We've been told we do a style of journalism called show your work journalism.
Ooh.
And a lot of people would just cut to the interview. And we want to show how hard it is. Like when you realize you've got to get a hold of this person, and how do you get a hold of them? And then they're dodging you, and to bring people on the investigative journey with us, which we think is kind of entertaining in its own way.
Well, the thing about it is you're very open in the very beginning of this. On episode 1, I mean, your only open door, you had to go to the people. Nobody was willing to talk to you, so you went to them.
Exactly. And you know what? That's what public service is all about. Though this is a true crime podcast, it's also a public service. And we are identifying areas in government that have failed the system. And that's why this story of the murder of Darren Seals is so critically important, because you have to go out and talk to people. And we went down so many rabbit holes, but we found this interconnectedness between the people we interviewed, and we were able to obtain more information, eventually getting us to the resolution of who killed Darren Seals and why.
Yeah. So how did you deal with everybody's interpretation? Everybody, I mean, you could have the same thing happening in front of each and every one of us, and we're all going to give you our interpretation.
I think that's not to judge, because everybody does have their own filter.
Yeah.
And what we want, everybody was right in their own way. It just, we had to get down to the nitty gritty. Like, Lala, who was in episode 1, she talked about these bullets being, on the crime scene. They were on the crime scene, but they weren't part of the crime. So we saw that, and we had to ask ourselves the questions: who would put those bullets there? Why would they put just 3 bullets on the scene? And so everyone had some level of truth in the story, and we just had to figure out what that was to get to the answer.
The two of you are masters at your sound bites. In other words, you gave me just enough to where I'm part of the story, and I wanted to hear more from the narrators. I wanted to know what was going on, but you gave me that authenticity just by giving me just a little bit of that sound bite.
Right on.
To do that, that's patience. That's leadership. Somebody had to have been there for you to be able, because you didn't just jump into it, did you? To say, no, we need to tell the story, but we need to have some salt and pepper first.
Absolutely. You're always looking for substance, and you're looking for answers. I mean, when we read, at least my local paper, we're not getting the real juice anymore in reporting. Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why people delve into podcasts, because they get into the nitty gritty, and people they desire, and they're hungry for the real facts of a story. And that's what we were able to produce, no matter how hard or crazy it was. I mean, we even interviewed someone who is considered a suspect in multiple murders. That was an uncomfortable interview, but we did it, and we got through it.
And frankly, a lot of the authorities we were talking to, whether federal, state, local in St. Louis County, seemed perturbed, seemed thrown off by the fact that we wanted specific answers to specific things, that we'd done research and we knew certain things we were asking them about, so they couldn't kind of snow us. And they would often take on an automatically antagonistic or adversarial, because they were confused, because they don't get this from the media, right? The media that relies on a relationship with them year in and year out, and therefore doesn't want to ruffle their feathers. And we were sort of like, let the chips fall where they may.
Oh, yeah, those decision makers, now that podcasting is a part of our life, oh, my God, you bring it up to any of them. First, they roll their eyes, but then they realize that you have an open field of exploration, which means this isn't going to be a news story that's going to last 2 minutes, like you guys are doing 10 episodes. I love this.
Bingo.
We sunshine requested ourselves, which is like the local Freedom of Information Act in Missouri. And you'll hear the podcast co-creator John Duffy and I discussing it in an early episode of season 2, we get back the results of Sunshining Our Names, and we find that when season 1 came out, the head of St. Louis County PD's information officer had first initially sent department-wide, do not participate. These guys are not on a fact-finding mission. And then when the show comes out, it was like, please don't listen to this. Truth will suffer. Mm-hmm. How did he know? He'd never heard it yet. And I think they actually would be surprised by the direction that season 2 ended up going in. I know we were.
Wow. Marie, when you leave no stone unturned, how do you gain the confidence to go to the protesters, the gang members, the police, the FBI agents? I mean, the meetings you guys must have had, or the planning stages, or do you just walk through the door saying, "Hi, I'm Marie, he's Ray. We got something to talk about"?
Well, you know what? At the very beginning, it was intimidating to just do a cold call on a person who is a relative of a serial killer.
Yes.
But it was very easy to talk to protesters, at least for me, because I was a state senator during the Ferguson uprising. And I was in the streets with gang members and underground rap artists and men who were crying in my arms. So it was natural to go to protesters. It was not natural to interview murderers and have to deal with people who may feel uneasy about the role their own family members had in a murder that we were covering. And so in a sense, we had to be sensitive towards that. I mean, there's a lot of nuance in terms of approaching a grandmother whose grandson was involved in a murder, but at the same time was murdered, and his life could have been saved if he was actually prosecuted. So it takes a certain level of gentleness, but it also takes courage. Because you want to get down to the facts and you want to draw out the information that leads you to the next step. And so for some of the interviews, I can tell you, Ricky Smith, I was nervous about, but he actually ended up being one of the best interviews for me. I would say one of the most unnerving interviews that both Ray and I had was the interviewing LP, who was in the rap group Bottom Boys, because we knew his history and we had all of his police records, and we knew that he was a drug dealer. We knew that he was a suspect in multiple murders. And so we had to do what we did. Every interview is different, but for the difficult ones, you find the inspiration and courage because you're following the story and you want to deliver good input for your audience members.
One of the things that I, in listening to the podcast and experiencing it, because it is an experience, is that when we read about first of all, I got to tell you, your transcripts keep me glued to that, because if I miss something out, it's right there in those transcripts. So thank you for doing that. But you listen to the story about Darren Seals, a rapper. He's an activist. He's got the kind of a charisma like a Malcolm X. But at the same time, I'm sitting there thinking, my God, this also could be Tupac, because Tupac was the rapper, was the activator. He was also so involved with the community.
He was. Tupac is a legend. He went through a lot of stuff, but his mother,
yes,
she was an activist, and his aunt was an activist. And a lot of this comes from, our past. I mean, we did another interview where someone asked about, where our country is heading. And, for some of us, what flashes before our eyes are 400 years of slavery if one option wins the presidency. And we have to remember that there's so many people who fought for the rights that we have right now. And Darren was an example of that. And he led people, but he also took the space that was void. He took the space that was empty and he made something out of that space so other people would have a voice. And people followed him because of his honesty in that approach in delivering, hey, this is the message that we should be communicating throughout the world and in a way every single day.
And when you mention Tupac, I mean, it makes me think of how charming Tupac was and the charisma he had. And that's where I feel like I see a lot of that in Darren Seals.
Yes.
And those who want to take this journey of these 10 episodes are going to be treated to the man in his own words. A lot of our archival audios, they call it, that we found of him. And he is a guy he will grab you. You will like him. You will want to know who this man is and what happened to him.
What I don't want listeners to do is skip the podcast. They've got to go 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 because everything comes together, because that's how you creatively have put this together. They want to know who done it right away, but it's like, whoa, stop. You've got to hear the full journey. And I love the way you guys patiently do that.
Hey, thank you. I mean, it was twisty and turny. We started with one premise, which is that there was a witness who saw Darren's Jeep being driven to the site where it was set on fire. And what he saw was, a black man 5'6" with dreads get out of that vehicle wearing socks on his hands, and then get into one of the two vehicles that had trailed. So we knew there was that gentleman, and there were the drivers of these two other vehicles. And then out of apparently the bushes comes what he thought was a white man with a ponytail. And a moment later, the car goes up in flames. So now you got a situation with at least 4 individuals, one of them white with a ponytail. And it sort of raises a lot of questions and a lot of trails that we start heading down, and they lead in all kinds of contrary directions.
And what's intriguing about this is the actual murderers of Darren Seals.
Yep.
They held on to the fact there was a white man. They wanted the public to believe that it was not them themselves, but it was this white guy who probably, what was inferred was that he was possibly a racist person who wanted to just kill Darren Seals. And, the reality was different than that. And so that's why it's so important to have these facts and really hone in on them, because perception is a big deal. And I know in politics, perception is everything. But when it comes to murder, you want to know the facts. And that's what we were able to discover. And I will also tell you, there are facts that came out on our journey as we were trying to tell the story. The example is what Ray just said. We didn't find out, the real storyline until we got to episode 10 in terms of who may have been in that car that drove off and was a participant in the murder of Darren. We didn't find that out until later on.
In fact, we were 6 weeks before release of this podcast when, I don't want to spoil it, but something dropped in our laps that basically answered everything. And we already thought we knew, but here it was in detail. And we had to scramble to redo that 10th episode.
I was going to ask you about that, if things started to play out even more as you were putting the podcast together, because most podcasters, they like to rush to get to the finish line, but man, not with you guys on this thing here. But how do you handle those moments when there is a quick twist? Do you go back into it because your continuity director is saying, look, that has to be in there for this to happen here?
We had a lot of those moments, actually. And you know what? It's still ongoing. Like, I don't want to let go of our 10 episodes. I believe in this story, there should be 5 more episodes because there's that much more information and we have so much more investigation to go. And, frankly, there's like one piece of evidence that's still lingering that our local county government will not release. And it's like a basic thing that any reporter would be able to get a hold of. But we believe that at least in my belief, we think that the St. Louis County doesn't want to release this because it's going to unfold the truth. And that's why, our story could go on for another 5 episodes. And it's very hard to give that up, knowing that we only have 10 episodes. So hopefully there's more to come. But I don't want to give up because, listeners deserve the truth.
And one of the things we really want to know is why was no one prosecuted for Darren's murder when we know for a fact that people knew who was involved? And that is where this document withholding by the St. Louis County Justice Center, among others, it seems to be rooted, is trying to keep that one little that answer away from the public.
Wow. In a very creative and professional way. I know we've talked about you guys being journalists, but what inspires me about listening to your voices, you're also activists. You're peaceful activists in the way of getting that story out there, telling me about our neighborhoods and our lives beyond the headlines.
Well, and Maria was a legit activist. Like when I was watching all this go down on TV and, and rooting for the Ferguson activists, she was out there getting tear gas.
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's true. This is, for me, this is another way of public service. Yep. And I didn't realize when I stepped into this role of host and producer and investigator that I would be evolving my public service into a podcast, but it is public service, and it's one to be commended in this space. We can't, as a former political person, we can't go door to door and talk about this podcast or that podcast. We have to talk about the bringing resources back to the community, things that people care about. But it's a different opportunity to communicate in a different way, and it's still at the same time is a public service, and that's an honorable thing.
Wow. You guys have got to come back to this show anytime in the future, whatever it's going to take to keep pushing this story and others forward.
Thank you, Arrow. Appreciate that. Hey, I'd be remiss to not to fail to mention that in addition to Maria and I, Mallory Kenoy and my co-creator of the original show, John Duffy, were both instrumental, as this was a team of 4 that went down this road for 2 years, and we hope audiences find it as interesting a journey as we felt we had. Unity.
I believe in unity, and I believe in teamwork, and I love it that you let us know that.
Thank you.
Be brilliant today, you two, okay?
Thank you so much.